Hi writers, readers, and gamers, I'm Christy Stratus, and today we have a little bit of a different format. Instead of playing the game while I'm talking to you, I have already played the game, and what is playing in the background right now is me playing the game. So right now, this is a voiceover. This is what people seemed to want who like my videos, and I did ask in the last video, I asked for opinions, and most people private messaged me actually and told me that this is what they were interested in. So we'll see if this works out. The great thing about this is that I can focus a lot better on the writing aspect of what I'm talking about. So I think it's going to come out really good, but let me know what you think in the comments. So today's topic is coming up with the perfect title. I'm really expressing what the story is about just by the title. One thing it's important to remember is, of course, you're going to have the book cover, and that's going to also set the tone for the book. But of course, if somebody just hears the title of the book or sees it, like, it's best to try to express the most important parts and most defining parts of the book through the book title. So I'm going to use my book Anatomy of a Darkened Heart as an example. The genre of the book is dark psychological historical fiction. So that's really three genres put into one. And when I was trying to come up with a name, first of all, I already knew, and I did talk about this with Josh Robertson in a recent interview. I will put the link to that down below. I did talk to him about this. I wanted the word anatomy in there because I knew that the story dealt with how a darkened heart is created, essentially. So you're sort of hearing the whole story behind it. And so I thought anatomy really suited it very well. So I wanted that in there, but even though I knew that word should be in there, I decided I was going to take a look at just all different kinds of words. I think that worked out really well, and I would recommend it to anyone. So what I did was I made a list, a huge list. This was actually another writer's recommendation. And I made a huge list of words. Now this can be like 15 words, it can be, 20 words, it can be however many words you think. I just thought that I would come up with all the words that I would relate to the novel. So that included things like psychology and historical and Victorian and 1800s. I just wrote down all kinds of words. And then I got a little bit more in depth, and I thought of some things that might symbolically represent the book, stuff like that. And so by writing all those words down, what I started doing was combining them. And so of course you can add the, ands and thes and ofs and ors and stuff in between those words, but if you're looking at them all, it's not such a shot in the dark. You've got a lot of things you feel express something about your novel sitting in front of you. So I found that really, really useful. I did the same exact thing when I was trying to determine the collection title. It's not a series, it's a collection, the Dark Victoriana collection. I had a tough time. There were a lot of different options, and one of the things that I was thinking about, this is funny, before I go into more depth about how I came up with the title for Anatomy of a Darkened Heart, I had actually one of the final names for the collection that I really was interested in doing was Stark Contrast. That really doesn't have the same ring to it at all, and it really doesn't say much about what the stories are about. It doesn't say that it's dark fiction, it doesn't say that it's psychological, and it doesn't say that it's historical. So really that should have knocked it out right from the beginning. But when you're really up close with the book and you're very into it, some things you think might be a good idea really aren't. And that's where another opinion can sometimes come in handy. You say to someone, here's my book blurb, if you've got one, or you tell them basically what it's about, and you say, what do you think? Or don't even tell them anything. Just tell them the name that you're thinking about, and they might be like, this is what I would assume it's about. And if it's way off, then that should tell you something, because it's really important. So for Anatomy of a Darkened Heart, one of the first things I thought was, well, what's the most important thing to get across besides the word anatomy? Let's put that word aside for now. Let's see, I could do historical fiction. Well, that would mean I would have to put something about Victorian or a certain person, which actually there are no historical figures in Anatomy of a Darkened Heart. It takes place in a particular time period and is very accurate with its details. So trying to do something to indicate it's historical fiction, well, that was better left to the collection title. Because then when people read the collection title, they know that the entire collection takes place in the Victorian era. So that was already, I didn't even have the collection title yet, and I knew that that was going to be the case. So strike historical fiction off the list. I didn't need to include that or anything related to it in the actual title. So then I moved on to psychological fiction. Well, how am I going to express that? And I had a really tough time coming up with anything that would express that. It was really tough, and it could take up the entire title and make it seem like the whole book is sort of about psychology or heavily focused in a dry way on it. So I decided the most important thing was dark fiction. And so I figured like the back of the book is going to show, the blurb, is going to show that it's psychological fiction. And then, like I said, the collection title will express the fact that it's historical fiction, Victoriana. So the other thing is, of course, visually the cover is going to show that it's historical fiction as well. We've got the dress. It's very in the time period. So the last thing was dark fiction. And it was most important because if somebody picks up your book and thinks that it is a romance or a comedy or something so completely the opposite of what it actually is, you're in big trouble and you're going to get dinged in your reviews because people just aren't going to realize. There are people who pick books up based on the title and just don't bother to read the back. So I knew that the fact that it's dark had to be expressed in the title. So Anatomy of a Darkened Heart. And then of course, then I had the backup of the actual book blurb, I had the backup of the collection title, and I had the backup of the visual elements of the cover. But that's how I came to my Anatomy of a Darkened Heart title. But the other thing to keep in mind is, like, for example, my next book is going to be called Lock and Key. Now, you could say to me, all right, well, I'm really not sure what that's about. And isn't that already taken? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. So what happened there was I already had a title for the shop in the first book that this second book is based on. It was called Lock and Key. And so since the second book is based entirely around the shop, I decided to name it that. So that was my own decision. But, normally if it was a first book and you were just randomly deciding on this name and it was either the only book or you just weren't sure about the next ones or whatever, you would really want to look further and deeper into that. And another thing you want to do is definitely look it up on Amazon and see if it's taken. So Lock and Key, unfortunately, is taken. It's a very, very popular comic series. So I do have an extra E at the end, and there's going to be a reason for that in the story. But when I look up Lock and Key with the extra E, only one other book comes up, and it is the exact opposite of mine. It's not dark, and it's some kind of, I don't remember if it's erotica or romance or something like that. Very, very different, clearly different based on even the covers. I have not done my cover reveal yet, by the way, but this was, again, like I said, something I couldn't really help. I could choose to name it something completely different, but I really had my heart set on the title being the name of the shop. So that's totally up to you, but that's how I came up with my book title. That's how I came up with my collection title. I really hope that this is useful for you. It is a more analytical way to really break it down and get a good idea of why you're naming it what you're naming it. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you like this format, and thank you so much for spending time with, as always. See you soon.